We are ready to get started today. How is everyone doing out there? I hope you are doing well. My name is Andrew Kuhn with Focus Compounding. Geoff Gannon with Focus Compounding. How are you doing over there?
I'm doing great, Andrew. How are you doing?
I am doing fantastic. Thank you very much for asking. Of course, as you all know, this is the voice and the audio part of our business. If you do want to get access to our investing website, go to focuscompounding.com. It's a website where individuals, both professionals and individual investors, contribute and write about ideas. And it's a pretty growing community with like-minded people, pretty much looking to compound some wealth and compound some knowledge. Mm-hmm. And if you do want to get access to that, be sure to sign up using the podcast promo code, which is podcast, and I'll take $10 off the monthly price indefinitely as long as you stay a member. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of things on the website, like stocks A to Z section, which has probably over 50 stocks that have been written up on the website.
Different write-ups,
Yeah, so it's good, and if you're ever looking for a stock in the future, it's probably a good place to see if it's been written up before on our website. So it's a lot of fun, and definitely check that out if that's something that you would be interested in. So today we're going to be talking about our research process. Mm-hmm. And obviously, being investors, we spend a lot of time researching stocks. Mm-hmm. And so I guess I'll give a little preamble to it. So what Geoff and I typically do is we meet up probably 2-3 times a week now. Mm-hmm. And we talk a lot about, obviously, a bunch of different ideas. But when we both decide that we're going to research a stock, we made the decision that we're not going to talk about it until we're in person with each other. Mm-hmm. Before, I think we would text about it sort of back and forth. And I think it's better that we do wait till we're in person so we could both draw our own conclusions and then come and chat about it. But from there, when we decide to research a stock, what do you typically do? Do you spend a lot of your time on SEC.gov and Edgar? Obviously, you and I, we both don't have Bloombergs. Right. We don't. Have you ever been on a Bloomberg or seen one in person? I don't even think I've ever seen one in person. I wouldn't even know how to use it. I was watching somebody on YouTube once work it, and it seemed like there was a lot of different hotkeys or whatever to find certain things. I was like, oh my gosh, this is like learning another language. Mm-hmm. But all the information we use is public. And I think we, obviously it's all public information, but sometimes being a good analyst too is learning to scuttlebutt in a little bit different ways, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, when we say something like public information, though, we do mean that we'll look up land records and we'll look for really old reports on the company and for things like that. We don't just mean that we're only reading the 10K necessarily.
Yeah, so going about different ways. So what do you think is your research process that other people could look to incorporate in their own research process to become better investors?
Well, I try to find out what the company does and stuff, which is on the 10K. Very quickly, I try to figure out what it might be worth to try to come up with a guess of that right away. Which helps me then refine that over time that way. So I try to figure out right away whether it could be within reason of what it's worth or not. Like I wrote about a stock recently on the Focus Compounding website, and I used like a price per acre thing for it. Mm-hmm. Well, right away I tried to check, is there any way that land in this particular zip code could be anywhere near that price per acre, right? That the market's valuing at. So like instantly I came up with an enterprise value divided by the number of acres of land, and then that gave me the value per acre that the company was selling at.
I think that's one of the biggest takeaways that I've had. Okay. I mean, remember when we went out and we were doing research on Domino's Pizza, and you did a little sanity check. I don't remember the numbers now, but I remember it was almost like profound for me. You did like market cap per pizza or something. Do you remember what you did with that?
Yeah, I did all of those things.
Yeah.
One thing is that you actually found some information of franchisees talking about how much they made and stuff.
Yeah.
But I tried to do a calculation how much I think they make just from the company's disclosures. And it's close to what they say the company actually does. Yeah. That they actually do. Because one of the first things you want to do with a franchisee is make sure that they're making enough money so that they can keep attracting good people to do it and all that. And so I was like, can they make enough money to live on this and to replace the job that they had, before as a manager of something else or whatever? And yeah, they can.
No, and that's great. And I think that's like a good first sanity check in a way. Like when you think about handicapping a stock, and when you were just saying that you were seeing what the market was valuing per acre of what the market thinks it's worth, and then from there you could sort of go and see, does that make sense? Is that actually like a fair price for what people are paying in that area? And then from there you could actually go, and what we did was obviously look up scuttlebutt around and look up land records and all the information we could find on a per acreage basis.
Yeah, but like the Domino's one you mentioned, I did instantly go, okay, so how many stores is that? How many pizzas is that a year, a month, a week, a day, and that is a good sanity check that you're not saying, okay, well, and then you're thinking how much can they make per pizza and things like that. But that's easy because you can start to think in terms of if you order from Domino's and stuff, you can like put this into context that's helpful. Yeah, so getting down to things like that is a good thing.
How much of your time do you think you spend doing sort of like the Peter Lynch approach where he would go and actually like visit the stores that he was at and kind of be the consumer and
it's
feel
hard to
experience?
say because Buffett has talked about this where he said he used to do a lot of scuttlebutt. And then after you do a lot of scuttlebutt, you start to not do the scuttlebutt, but to get the same answers through looking at public things. And I tend to do that more.
What do you mean looking at public things?
Like if you noticed, I was able to figure out what I thought the franchisees made.
Yeah.
And then we checked that by going online and stuff and seeing what they said. But I've gotten better at calculating ratios that the companies don't calculate for you. Like when we said price breaker and stuff, that's nothing that's ever discussed by the company, right? So you just figure that out.
It's like they give you enough bits and pieces to sort of take with you. And
yeah, I mean, I've talked before how I value banks on a per dollar of deposits basis. That's not normally how banks talk about their earnings and stuff, but it's for the kind of banks that I'm interested in, it's definitely the best way to look at them.
Yeah, and you always talk about, I don't know if we talked about publicly on air, but thinking like a journalist. And how when a journalist goes to a certain situation, they probably weren't at the situation that they're writing about, but they're taking many different avenues to learn about it. They're talking to people. They're seeing how they felt. They're seeing things through their eyes, and they're taking multiple different routes to pretty much learn about the situation, about the story. And I think that's a good way to sort of think about it when trying to figure out a business as well.
Yeah.
Right? It's not, I mean, we talk about 10Ks a lot, obviously, but it's not all just from a 10K on how to learn about a company.
But there is often information in the 10K or hints about things in the 10K that are really useful because it's going to be rare that you need more than like 5 numbers about a company. If they're the right 5 numbers, then that's going to tell you everything you need to know about whether you should buy the stock or not. So if you see a company and they have nearly 100% retention rate and they have the same margins all the time, then you're just asking, okay, will they have more clients in the future? If they will, then, if they ever get more new clients, then the stock could be attractive, just at a pretty high price. So in some cases, it's things like retention rate that are the key thing to understand about the industry. And there are things that we've looked at that way where it then becomes that I spend half my time on the whole thing about the stock, about just trying to figure out, well, does anyone ever leave this company or something, Sure. We talked about that, I think, with Breeze Eastern. The extent of my scuttlebutt on that one was really just trying to get talking to everyone who was a customer of them or their competitor and saying, well, why don't you change? And how hard would it be and things like that.
How were you finding people to reach out to?
Well, because they're like, so with engineering type things, people often announce their deals. So it's, you'll get things like, there's just ways to figure out through searching online and stuff that they'll mention that a certain company, like so for instance in that one, say it's like California state fire rescue thing or something, or county in some place, let's say police department or something in a certain county. You may be able to find an article that says they took a delivery of 5 Sikorsky helicopters or something. And then you can find out, well, who's likely to be the one on that model helicopter. So you can see what model of devices they have on what helicopters usually by getting catalogs from the companies. You don't have to get them. You just go on their websites and things like that. It's not hard. We're talking about a land company, and in that case, how I found information about it was by there's briefly mentioned in an article about the company who the builder is who's going to be doing the actual building. Yeah. So I figured, well, the builder, this is a really big deal. Sure. So the builder's a lot more likely to be talkative about this than anyone else. So they tell you what the contract value is for, right? So the size of the contract. So once you know the size of the contract of what they're going to build on the land, that gives you a pretty good hint of how much you think the land might be worth when they sell it off and stuff. Whereas the company itself wasn't telling you that. But because this is a really big deal for them, you get it that way.
It's almost like you're a detective, right? They give you little pieces to the puzzle, and you have to complete it yourself.
Yeah.
And that's how I think the art form of investing comes from.
Yeah, but it starts with the 10K.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's good. So from there, How much further research do you do once you decide to buy a stock?
Depends on the company. Sometimes it's within a night that I know, and in other cases it can be months of trying to figure out certain things because I'm not comfortable with something that's very important.
And if you're not comfortable with it, is that one that you typically pass on? Like, do you think the good investments just come at you where you don't need to spend months trying to figure out certain things? And I mean, I know that's kind of hard, but I mean, Warren Buffett has always said, now Warren Buffett's a little bit different because he has some experience, but he just says it shouldn't be that hard and an idea should hit you on the top of the head. And I know you've talked about it, how majority of your research, when you come across an idea, you pretty much know instantly if it's something that you'd be incredibly interested in. And then just from there, it's, checking a lot of facts and then seeing where it's trading and, et cetera.
Yeah, I'd say you're usually, certainly on one day, you're getting 80% of the way to buying it if it's a good idea or something.
Yeah.
There may be some things that you have to figure out still, depending on the company. Some things are clearer than others, that they're really obvious. But yeah, I'd say usually it's a very quick. It shouldn't take a lot of research to figure things out in terms of like the actual calculations of it. Shouldn't take that long. I mean, I'm trying to think of what would take a long time. What would take a long time to research? Why would you be spending months researching something?
I mean, yeah, I don't know, really.
I mean, if you're focused on it and going
Sure.
with the internet and everything now,
Yeah.
what are you not doing that first night that you're going to figure out in the next couple months?
Yeah, I mean, just a couple Google. Yeah, I completely got that. Have there ever been an industry that you just kind of do a hard stop and shy away from, or are you willing to go pretty much anywhere?
I'm willing to go anywhere.
Because I've never seen you invest in like pharmaceuticals or healthcare or any
right,
of those.
Because I don't
of
understand them well enough. Yeah. But I'd be willing to invest in them at the right price.
Yeah.
Yeah. The economics is the difficult part. So for the pharmaceutical companies, I have invested in, I invested in IMS Health. I invested in BioReference Labs. So I invested in a company that did, at the time I invested, it was a simpler company. It did like urine and blood tests regionally. It's an easy business to understand. So like similar to that would be like LabCorp.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But a small version of that. There used to be a lot more than little regional ones that got bought up. So that's simple in medical stuff, and I had no problem with that. Eventually, I started doing more complex and expensive testing, and so then I wasn't okay with the stock then. But same thing with pharmaceutical stuff. I mean, I want to understand the drugs, like how much they're getting a return on their money for.
I don't know if I could pronounce all the drugs that they own.
Yeah, but I invested in a company that builds nuclear reactors.
Yeah, sure.
So it's the economics of it.
Yeah.
If you understand the
So it comes
economics
up,
of building a nuclear reactor for the customer, then it doesn't matter if you really understand how the reactor works or not.
Sure. I think it's fair. I actually just got done reading Bad Blood.
Yeah,
About Theranos, so that was definitely a good book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, but the key thing is I will pass on certain things because the business model has an issue, and I should talk about one that's how to put this, one that I almost always pass on, and some people are surprised that I pass so quickly on them, which is someone brings me an idea, and they say, this has happened a couple times. Basically, the input for something is a byproduct from another activity, another function that it can perform. So in a sense, we're doing something with metal or something, and we have some scrap that comes off of that. Mm-hmm. And we're going to take that scrap and we're going to use it for something else. Okay. I pass on that all the time,
Sure.
something like that, because I can't figure out the pricing between them. The example I give all the time with that is I would invest in an oil refinery, but I wouldn't invest in an ethanol refinery, because ethanol's input is in the U.S. is corn, which has no relationship really to the price of gasoline in your car. So you're basically trying to turn corn into a substitute for moving your car around. So I don't like that kind of business because that's incredibly hard to predict. They're both moving all the time, and they're not moving together that way. But if a company is just turning oil into petroleum product stuff, then it's a totally different story.
Sure.
And so there've been a couple where I've passed on things for that reason. Where
so it really comes down to the business model. Like, you're sort of agnostic towards the actual industry itself, but if you like the business model, then it's something that you'll research.
Mm-hmm. I don't like coal, but I bought NACO.
Yeah.
And I also bought BWX Technologies, which is also involved in coal stuff.
Yeah.
People think that means I must like coal, but it doesn't.
That's so funny. That's funny. Actually, Munger doesn't like ethanol either. I think 2 years ago when I was at his Daily Journal thing, he was talking about it, and he's like mixing corn with, well, he didn't like it either.
Mm-hmm. But that's one where thinking in terms of the long-term results that a company will get, it's very hard to predict based on with the business model of what they're actually doing in a given year. So with ethanol, if you're lucky and you happen to have a year in that example, say the company gets started and they have a year where for whatever reason there's a lot of corn. There's just too much corn. People planted too much corn last year, right? Well, that's what determines the price of corn mostly. I mean, sometimes it's some drought somewhere, but a lot of times it's just how much farmers decided to plant, whether they planted corn or soybeans or whatever on their land. So for whatever reason, farmers picked to grow a lot of corn, too much. So corn prices are low this year. Okay. At the same time, something happens in the Middle East or something, oil prices are high. So gasoline prices are high. So you have this really cheap input, and then you get to sell it at a really high price, right? So, but what happened is just luck on two different coin flips, basically. Like, it's really hard to figure that out over a long period of time, is whether you got two lucky rolls. I mean, what if each case that was a 15% chance or lower, is that a case of like rolling two dice and both came out 6, and that's the odds that will ever happen again that way? Or is that a typical year for them? It's really hard to tell in those cases. So like almost no amount of research could solve that for me. And that usually you have to figure out pretty quickly, getting it down to only one or two different variables that you can then research. And in those cases, I know that I can't predict the price of corn or oil. Mm-hmm. In other cases, like say land or something, I might be able to predict what land is worth right now in some place.
Sure.
So usually it's a question of, is this an important question? And is there a way for me to answer it? Sometimes, like the question of what oil prices should be in the future, if you could know what oil prices are going to be for each of the next 5 years, that would be really helpful in making a lot of investment decisions. But I just believe there's no way that I can figure that out. So it's not worth my time to try to spend to figure that out. Same as like the Fed funds rate. I wrote so much more about the Fed funds rate for the banks that I wrote up for Singular Diligence, which is on the Focus Compounding website. There's like 5 bank reports there. And we wrote more about the Fed funds rate than I actually spent time thinking about it, because everyone's trying to predict the Fed funds rate. Yeah. There's no way that if I spent 100 hours on it, I could come to a conclusion that will be better than everyone else's.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I didn't spend 100 hours on it,
Sure.
You want to spend a lot of time on the few things you could figure out that you'll be right and other people haven't thought about.
No, I think that's a good way of thinking about it. Do you ever read analyst reports?
Yeah.
How do you get them? Just Googling around?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you do go on Value Investors Club too.
Value Investors Club.
See what people say about it.
If there's a short thesis, then I always read that. And
do you read that first, or do you read the 10K first? Or does it depend?
Depends. Yeah. I'm happy. I can read a write-up that someone wrote as the first step if necessary, if I really don't understand what the situation is with this. I mean, I'll try to pick up the 10. I'll try to look at the past results and read the 10K, but with many interesting stocks, the past results on Morningstar, Guru Focus, or wherever aren't going to tell you anything. Mm-hmm. And you just want to know without reading a write-up or reading the 10K yourself. Like we talked about a Timberland company. What would I see? The EV to EBITDA or the PE or something? Let's start with the price to book. None of that matters if they bought the land 100 years ago, right?
Sure.
So it's hard to get those things. Whereas most people are going mostly off that stuff. They're seeing the PE and stuff right away. Do you try to read the 10K before you read reports?
I try to, because I don't want to get swayed by it or get biased. And I think it's good to. And I talked about it when I was doing research on Ascendant, how I didn't look up any sort of current events before I read the 10K, so I didn't understand why we were even looking at it, because I'm like, is he really interested in a company like this? So I spent maybe a good 2 hours reading the 10K, and then I went and I Googled around. I'm like, okay, so now I know why we're looking at this company, which I think is good to do, though, because I mean, net, even though obviously what we talked about, we're not investing in it, it was still a good exercise for sure.
Yeah, and what point do you look at the price?
Of where it's trading?
Yeah.
Like, well, I mean, I have a general idea when I read the 10K, though. I mean, I have a general idea because I see what the trading history has been. But see where it's trading today, I try to wait until I'm fully done and think and see what I think it could be worth. Which I think is usually the price that I appraise it at is never the price that I end up at. Okay. But I think it's just good to do that. I know we talked about that publicly a lot.
So maybe we should talk about what research things we do that other people might not be doing.
Sure.
presumably everyone can go on Edgar and read the 10K.
Yeah.
It takes 30 seconds to tell people to do that.
Yeah.
Do we read more news articles about it?
I would say so, right?
We like Google around to find a lot of news articles.
I mean, you talk about being a journalist, right? Learning more about the business itself. One thing I think we do is when we were talking about seeing what a private buyer would pay. So we read past proxy transactions,
right?
Which I think that's probably one of the most underused way. I'm sure a lot of people do it, but I never see a lot of people really write about that a lot. I quite frankly, I gain a lot of insight from doing that.
Yeah, I think I saw a presentation by was it Michael Price, someone like that, about that he thought was the best source of information.
You said Gabelli does that, right?
Yeah. They definitely do. You work off comparables of what strategic buyers and stuff.
They're kind of fun to read too, quite honestly. I mean, it's not like so dry like an annual report. I mean, they're more in like, I guess.
Yes, we should mention what this is. So after a company announces it's going to have a merger and stuff, it has to put a vote to shareholders that it's selling out. And in that, they give an SEC filing, which will include background to the deal, right? So you can read how the deal came to be, who presented to the board, when, and why, and what the initial contact was, who the different investment bankers involved were, and stuff like that. And someone will prepare, an investment bank will prepare a fairness opinion. And in that, they will include comparable transactions. So like past prices at which entire companies like this one were sold. And that's usually very useful information. They may also prepare, they don't really always do, multiples at which things trade today, although you could find that yourself. Yeah.
No, and I think it's just, like I said, it's just getting more information. And I think that's a good way of going about doing it. What else do we do? I mean, obviously we read earnings reports and stuff like that. I think transcripts, excuse me. Everyone obviously probably reads that. What else do we do? I mean, when we were looking at that company we were referring to on the land, we did a lot of research on the area.
Right.
And it was also reaching out to people that live in that area and own property in that area to see what they think. I think that was good.
Yeah, sometimes we look at the back. I don't know if you do, but sometimes you look at the background of the people involved because in the annual proxy statement, you'll get a list of all the shareholders. And there'll be things like people's names and address and stuff. You can Google those things, which I always do. What boards they served on. Yeah. I'm always highlighting the other boards that they serve on, the other things that they have to find.
Do you like seeing that when board members serve on a bunch of other boards?
No.
I don't either. I'm like, this guy's a professional board.
Yeah. Those people aren't usually important, though. Those aren't the important ones.
Yeah.
It's the ones that you see if they're serving there and they also do something with something else.
Sure.
So we talked about Pendrell, for instance. Pendrell has certain relationships. The company isn't supposed to have relationships, but I should say the people who served on Pendrell's board, either as chairman or CEO or something, or a board member, had connections to both Boss Holdings, which is a frequent net, and a company that was called Future Fuel. And I'd actually researched both Boss Holdings and Future Fuel before. So actually I recognize the name of someone involved in it. And that's not unusual. That's happened before too. Sometimes it's for like local reasons or something. Like I happened to research like 3 companies in Minnesota, and apparently some people
serve on multiple boards in Minnesota.
Every board you can in Minnesota of a public company. Yeah. I remember looking at Norwegian companies, and Norway is not a very big country, and a lot of the companies have pretty close to the same board. Sure. You'll recognize the names of a lot of the people. Some of the people have been CEOs of several of the top Norwegian companies. So, yeah. So that's the other thing that you research. It depends. If you're like a majority shareholder or CEO or something, that might matter a lot to me to research information about you. So Pendrell is sort of controlled by, he's probably a billionaire, so he was controlled by someone who, at least at one time, had been a billionaire. The land company we mentioned is also controlled by someone who probably was worth more than $1 billion at some point in his career, certainly, and may still be, I don't know. So, you would look up those people and find out information about them. With Pendrell, I remember looking up information about what caused the losses. Right, because the company is vague about why they had net operating losses from a long time ago, so you had to find out what event caused that. And
sure.
Stuff. Yeah.
No, I think that's good. What else do you think we do that other people don't do? Or what do other people do that we don't do?
Well, you mentioned analyst reports. I mean, have I read analyst reports? Yes. Are any of them useful? Not usually. So analyst reports can be interesting sometimes. Their recommendation is useless and their model is useless, but they're usually very well informed about the company. Sure. And will usually provide some information that you can then Google.
Too. Yeah.
So they'll like you'll be looking up. The analyst will know the names of the different chemical plants and stuff that they operate and where they're located and stuff more so than the company will say. So they'll say we do this at this place and stuff, and then you can figure out based on that kind of more granular detail that they have. You can then Google things about it and stuff like that. So analysts are well informed about those things. They're very knowledgeable about the industry and stuff like that. They're, the value they put on it isn't useful, and they do a lot of modeling, which isn't useful. So I don't know if I'd recommend people read analyst reports or not. I think you can mine them for names and locations and things like that. That's how I use most research. I'm reading an article. I don't really care what the person's opinion is about it. Or even a Value Investors Club. I don't care do they like it or not. Yeah. I don't care.
Yeah, you just gather data.
I'm just there to get data, to highlight names of things that they're mentioning.
Sure.
And then you can go and Google those things and find out about them and stuff. Yeah.
No, I think that's good. Do you ever email management or like investor relations or anything like that?
No. I've worked with people on things where they did that, but I've never talked to management.
Yeah. Do you think it's useful?
I don't think it's a good idea to talk to management.
Why is that?
I'm alone on that one. A lot of people think it's a good idea. I think it presents some very serious risks in terms of
like biases and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know if I've said this on this podcast before, but I've said before. Do you know what every company that ended up in bankruptcy has in common?
What, they all were optimistic about their company?
They all had a plan for avoiding bankruptcy.
Yeah, sure.
So
that's a pretty good point.
I mean,
well, yeah. Were they gonna say don't invest in our company? Our company sucks. We're not. I mean, we're gonna go under.
Yeah. My concern is more, what if they seem like a wonderful, charming, competent person?
And most of them are.
But I don't care.
Yeah, exactly.
Because that's not going to determine whether the business is a success or not.
Sure, but a lot of people sort of get seduced in that, I would say.
Sure. I've had useful things where I talk to branch managers.
So like just
store managers and managers of
not
branches
corporate
and stuff.
type executives.
Like say a bank or something, I don't think there's anything that the president of a bank or something could tell me that it wouldn't be more useful information from a chief lending, from not a chief lending officer, but just from a lending officer. And a lot of the things that the top executives are telling you are things that are being put in the 10K and are being put in the investor relations.
You probably definitely get more input from store managers and stuff like that. I could definitely see that. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I don't ever try to talk to management. And other people do. It's a bias thing. I'm trying to avoid talking to them because in most cases, I don't think it's likely that the things that are important about that management are things that I would get from talking to them. I think management's very important in some cases, but I don't need to talk to them. Mm-hmm. So like DreamWorks Animation, I thought Jeffrey Katzenberg was very important, but there's plenty of information on him and what he did in the past. There's no need to talk to him.
Yeah.
Not that you're going to talk to him, but my point is there's just nothing that you would get from that. But on the other hand, I read books about him and stuff. So you could say, so do I talk to management? No. But would I try to learn about management? Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
In most companies that we invest in and stuff, I've found articles about that person in some way.
Buffett used to do that. I'm sure he still does it now, but he used to do, I mean, he knows everyone, I'm sure. But in his early days, he would do that, right?
Yeah.
Learn about the
management. I noticed those things. We were talking about a land company.
Yeah.
I noticed that person has pledged all of his stock in that company as to a bank.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So he's got something going on.
Don't give any hints away, Jeffrey. All right.
So, but I mean, I noticed those things. Sure.
Yeah.
I invested. Actually, didn't get to invest in it. I had written up a company that we never got to.
For singular diligence.
Put out for singular diligence. Yeah. Where there was an issue because the CEO had borrowed a ton of money against the stock that he had. And the stock went down and he ended up having to sell some of it.
What stock was that? So
Lifetime Fitness, yeah.
Yeah, I thought so. Look at that. I know what you're talking about.
So, yeah, the research things that way. So I've done that. Like I said, land records. I've always looked at land records.
But I don't think a lot of people think about it like that. Like to go look at like land records and stuff like that, do they?
I don't know. I mean, for most companies, you're looking at it wouldn't matter that much, but I do that.
For certain companies, that's what I'm saying.
Although
to
I
add
do
it to
look
the
at
research process.
I look at a satellite image of every company's like offices. to know where they are and stuff. Yeah.
Well, we did that with NACO too.
Yeah.
To see how far the coal plants were from.
Yeah, to find that. But I mean, also just headquarters things. Where are they? And because when you're looking at a company for the first time, I mean, I don't for every company because they may give an address which is someplace in New York or Boston or something, and I know what it is. But or we get lots of them around here in Dallas. I know what they're talking about. So they say they're in Grapevine. I know what Grapevine is. You know. But sure, for a lot of them, like George Risk or something. I don't know what that town is in Nebraska. I have to see an image of it.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, I think that's good. I mean, that's a good way of thinking about it.
And you use Wikipedia a lot for those things. Of course, I go to the Wikipedia page for every town that their headquarters is in, and people's Wikipedia pages and things. Sure. Yeah, you find out all those things. But all this stuff is very fast.
Sure.
We're talking about things that take. It doesn't even take 5 minutes to find a satellite image of the offices that
it's
they're
just knowing where to look, though. I think for a lot, or like knowing what to look for is what a lot of people
for a lot of the CEOs you're reading about, even CEOs that you've never heard of them and they're ever or heard about this company until now, you can find 10 articles written in their state papers and stuff about them on Google like right away. And then you just read each of them and stuff. Well, how long does that take? You just spend 30 minutes doing it. Yeah,
it's focus.
And usually it's not interesting stuff. But
Google is your best friend.
Yeah.
I mean, but you Google a lot of stuff. I know you do in your investment process. Yeah,
a ton of it. Yeah, and Excel, because you're putting lots of things in Excel to get sort of
memorize, organize all the data.
Yeah, but especially get like the math on different things, sort of break down. You know, although you can do a lot of that in your head, but you just want certain estimates on things. Yeah,
I think it's good to keep Excel though. If you want to reference it in the future, so you just have all that research still right there.
When I had more room, I used to keep filing cabinets full of all handwritten things, all the printouts and all handwritten of what I had. Yeah, entire folders of all that they have. From things about the biography of Buffett and stuff, it's clear that he does that.
Yeah, I think he still does that. He still has data.
That was the best way to do it. Just having file cabinets full of it and a folder that you just open up and you put everything that you want in it in there, and then you pull that folder back out.
Yeah,
and that's the best way to do it.
But it comes also from organizing everything too to be more efficient, so you can reference it in the future. Like sometimes if I just am like sloppy in my notes, I mean, the better notes I take, the more I know it's going to be more useful. And I mean, it's silly to talk about, but that is also important.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes you pull up a piece of paper and it's just a bunch of numbers. You're like, oh my gosh, I don't even know what I was doing here. Like it's just some scratch math or something. But yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if that's helpful to people exactly.
What?
I mean, what we said about the different research things. I never know what people mean when they say like, what research do you do and what sources do you use?
Well, I think it's different for every stock.
It's different for every stock.
You know, we're talking about land company. How many people value land companies? Probably not a lot.
Right, but there's a question with each stock of what the situation is.
But what it is the key to take away is what you were saying. Find out like what the questions you should be thinking about, and then just go look and try to answer them.
Yeah, we talked a little bit.
So like, what's the big case with a land company? Okay, the market's valuing this per acre at X. Let's go and try figuring out what it really is in real life.
Yeah, and like we talked about,
that's the main driver, main question.
Yeah, and we talked about Apple, and I said there's two things I wanted to talk about, which was iPhones and the gross margin on it, and services. And there's a lot of information about lots of other things the company does, but I wasn't interested in talking about those things, and I was only interested in finding out the data on those other points that they have. You know, sometimes it's hard. I read Google's 10K, and Google is very, very bad that way. They put together lots of things that they should separate out, and their 10K is not helpful. So, for instance, it's very hard to tell if they're disguising things about what's happening with Google because they're combining with YouTube and vice versa. And it's very easy to get the wrong impression about what's probably happening. You can try to make some guesses and things and find information from other sources. Lots of surveys and research things. I mean, what have you seen me use? What research things have I used or that are different than what people normally use?
Well, what I do like, I mean, like I said, I like that the fact that sort of in the beginning, you sort of do like a handicapping type exercise where you say, okay, what is the market valuing at, and could this be interesting to take a next step forward, right? So I think that's interesting that you do that. But other than that, I mean, and obviously my process stems a lot from yours. It's just kind of reading a lot of the reading 10Ks, get caught up on the business, and then from there, just Googling around to answer whatever questions that you have on the actual business.
Yeah, I was thinking, I was talking to someone recently, and I know I used the CIA World Fact Book, which is very useful for specific countries. The CIA has an annual fact book, which gives plenty of details on the economies and stuff of each country. That's very useful. Everyone should bookmark that.
The CIA?
CIA World Fact Book, yeah.
Wow, I haven't heard of that, actually.
It's very useful. It's basically like an almanac for the world, but it breaks it down by country. So if you need to, because sometimes you need to learn about a small country or something, and you've never looked at it before, and you need information. So it'll give you the unemployment rates and information about who the political parties are, and what different policies of the country are and stuff.
Central intelligence.
It's very useful.
Yeah,
very useful because it's so quick that you can do it, and you can get information about. Like if you're looking at an oil company in some country, and then you read that 90% of their exports are oil, that's an important thing to know, and you can figure it out right away by looking at that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's good. I think that was a great discussion as we are wrapping this up at 36 minutes.
Okay.
We're supposed to keep it at 15 minutes, but it's good. Just keep the conversation flowing. We want to thank everybody for tuning in with us here today. If you do want to get access to Geoff's weekly memo that he sends out on an investing topic, go to focuscompounding.com, and on the homepage, there's a spot to enter in your email, and that will allow you to receive from him a weekly memo that he sends out on an investing topic or investing principle. One week it was about probabilities, and every single week it's something different. Yep. And he definitely puts a lot of thought into it. And if you do become a member, there is a page where you can get all past memos there as well.
Yeah, the members can see all the past memos. There's probably, 10 or a dozen or something when you're listening to this.
Yeah, so it's a lot of fun. So we want to thank everybody for tuning in. Thank you very much for listening, and we will see you in the next podcast.